There was what appeared to be like an inland hurricane or something at the Mozart 100 this last weekend in Salzburg, Austria, and I caught wind of it just because I love scrolling through social media and seeing what's happening in trail running and seeing how runners are doing out there. Just a lot of fun, and Tommy's reels and all that sort of stuff on Salzburg on the Mozart 100 were just crazy, and so I wanted to do an episode. I don't always do episodes or rarely do episodes that are like really timely, have a timestamp on them, but he just ran this race a few days ago and I wanted to have him on to tell the story. It fits perfectly with season 3. Tommy was with us on season 1 and he had some really great insight on how to keep going even when you want to quit. So fun to have him back. Great guy, great content online. Hope that you give him a follow. I'll have his Instagram in the show notes. Before we get started, I hope to earn a follow wherever you're listening to this. So if you're enjoying the content, if you wouldn't mind clicking follow, subscribe, whatever it is that your platform calls it, it helps a ton, and I'd really appreciate it. If you're not digging the content or you don't want to listen to the next episode, that's fine. Don't subscribe. This is just for those of you who are digging it. All right. Here's my buddy Tommy. Usually my podcasts aren't necessarily time sensitive, but I saw something crazy on Instagram this week, and I thought it'd be fun because it's in line with what I'm doing, where I'm highlighting races, just because there's more races out there than I could ever run, and so I just love to talk about them, hear about them, and unfortunately, at the end of each one, I start to think about how I can actually run it. So my value proposition of let's learn about them and not run them is not actually working. It just feels like I've got more races I want to run. However, this one, I have no desire if this is what the weather's like. There was like an inland hurricane in Austria, and my friend Tommy, my Instagram friend and now podcast friend, he's my first ever return guest on the podcast. I just hit him up and said, hey, it's fresh on your mind. It looked absolutely miserable. And usually that's like a compliment in the ultra world, but I don't know. It looked crazy. So he ran the Mozart 100. It's 100K in Austria. And so Tommy, welcome. Let's learn about the race and then let's go into the hurricane. So tell me, well, welcome. Hi.
Yeah, good to be back, man. Good to be back.
Yeah.
It was it's funny because it is a very appealing race. It's based in Salzburg. So it's actually a race I've had my eye on for a few years now. Uh-huh. It's now a UTMB race. So that means, you get your stones if you're looking to enter UTMB as part of the circuit, the series.
The main event.
But it's in Salzburg, which is an Austrian city on the border of Germany, in the sort of Eastern Alps in Austria. It's the birthplace of Mozart, hence the name. It's the film location of Sound of Music.
Amazing film. I'm not afraid to say it.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's a romantic location. The main reason I read a lot about it, and one of the main reasons people sign up is because it's just a beautiful place. Great trails, great scenery. And it's a fairly runnable, although the elevation isn't nothing, it's fairly runnable in some ways, which we can get into.
Wow. That is surprising.
Yeah, and
I think it just looks like a mountain, like a crazy mountain. I mean, I guess when I think of Austria, because of the Sound of Music, the hills are alive. Like there's a lot going on, and so you're saying, weather permitting, it could be a faster race.
Yes. When I say runnable, I guess I mean like it's kind of classic Western European trails, quite wide. Some of it is quite wide gravel. So a lot of it was narrow. So you're trying to overtake people if you need to, sort of almost tapping them on the shoulder kind of thing. But a lot of it is kind of, there's a lot of breadth to the trail, so you can go at your own pace.
That's cool.
And UTMB races, I don't know if you ever do a UTMB race, they're getting to a point now where some of the bad feedback is they're quite popular. So they are, unless you get quite far up, sort of in the front of the pack, like top 100, you are in a bit of a crowd, and still at that sort of, when you're sort of usually within the first sort of 10K, 6 miles, I'm sort of there at the top 100, and it is still quite crowded. So you're sort of in a bit of like in a bit of a line going up the trails. Okay. So you're not going to be lonely on a UTMB race. So if you like that, then sweet. But
yeah,
there is a bit of that.
Yeah, that's a good take.
Yeah.
So when you got there, so you live in London, and
Mm.
did you fly into Salzburg? Did you? I mean, I've given up on trying to sound cool with geography. I don't know. So how did you get from London to
Yeah, yeah.
Salzburg? Even what's that like?
Yeah, one of the really appealing things again about Mozart 100 is that it starts and finishes in Salzburg, and it has an international airport. So you
Oh,
can go
okay.
from London to Salzburg. So you can go from Luton,
Oh,
or you can go from Gatwick to Salzburg, and then take a 15-minute cab
okay.
to your hotel or Airbnb. So it's super easy in that sense. Like other races in the Alps and stuff, you'll go to, I don't know, Geneva, and then take a bus for a few hours to get where you need to be. Whereas
Yeah.
Salzburg is really nicely located. So logistically, it's a great race in that sense.
Okay.
And Salzburg's just a really nice European city.
Yeah.
Really cool.
So in your lead up to the
Yeah.
race, did you we start to look at the weather, as soon as, for me, as soon as my Apple, my phone will forecast out that far, and it's always wrong. Like, we can't predict 10 days in the future very well at this point. And so it's
Yeah.
changing, and some days you think, oh, it's going to be raining, or it's not. Like, at what point did you feel, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, this is how I'd feel. At what point did you feel doomed?
That is, I felt like I had to really start thinking about what the experience was going to be like with full rain
Uh-huh.
24 hours prior. I
Okay.
think I stayed hopeful, so I arrived on the Wednesday. The race was on the Saturday. So I arrived on the Wednesday. Weather wasn't looking like ideal, but the morning looked good. And I was like, okay, I don't mind a bit of rain. That's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll clear up. And to be honest with you, the forecast was just getting worse and worse. And so by the evening before, like the Friday evening, I was like, okay, shit, this is going to be an absolute wet fest.
Oh,
I've never experienced like an ultra that's just rain the whole time, but
yeah.
the
Yeah.
forecast was at that point accurate, and it was saying that from 1 a.m. till for 24 hours or more than, it was just going to be raining. Some of
Mm.
it heavy rain, some of it light rain, but yeah, it was going to be
Yeah.
a sloppy run for
I
sure.
mean, we there's so many reasons why we all do these races, but one of them is that we want to give ourselves a fighting chance to have a great time and a great memory. Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe you look at weather like that and you think, you know what, I'm just going to live to run another day. Talk to me about what's happening in your head at this point when you know it's going to be like this. Were you just like, all right, here we go, it's just going to be hard, or were you thinking maybe I just won't do this? Like, I'm just going to enjoy some wine here in Salzburg, and you know what I mean? Like, did you question going to the start line?
I think I had too much at stake in my mind. Like I wouldn't have pulled out because
Yeah.
you pay for everything to get there and you put loads of
Yeah.
effort in
Yeah.
to get there. And I'd rather DNF than pull out. I'd rather
Yeah.
like go and see what it's like. But
Yeah.
I think I just started thinking, right, at the end of the day, so I went out for the views, for the experience. My priority number one was to have fun. I was even going to write on
Yeah.
my arm, like P1, have fun. Because the
I love
context,
that.
the context for me was to get back after an injury. So, I'd
Yeah.
been injured for a fair amount of time. And this was me kind of trying to prove myself that I could be an ultra runner again.
Yeah.
So, I was like, let's see what happens. But I was like, at the end of the day, once you're wet, that's it.
Right.
You're soaked through, right? So you're just going to
Mm,
admit to yourself that however long it takes, 15 to 18 hours, whatever it is, you're just going to be soaked.
yeah.
So I think I started becoming okay with the idea of being like just completely wet, the
Mm,
evening of. And as long as you've got your gear in order and you've
yeah.
got enough kind of zip bags and stuff sorted, then
Yeah.
that's fine. I had a dry bag, so I knew that like
Okay.
my spare socks and all that sort of stuff would be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone's going to be in the same boat. So I just thought, whatever. I didn't actually consider
Hmm.
was like how it would impact the trails themselves, which was very dumb.
Mm.
Because Mozart 100 that's the main event. It's a 105k race. It
Okay.
actually comes to 100, usually 108k. But there are other races. So you have what they call Mozart Ultra, which is an 80k, a 50 miler. And then
Okay.
you have a marathon distance. I think there's a half marathon distance as well, which is actually a
Okay.
30k.
Okay.
Um, So there's thousands of runners going over the trails, and they do the same or similar routes. So as someone who's not an elite athlete doing the Mozart 100, you're going over like trails that thousands of feet have gone over before you. And if they're wet, it just gets worse and worse. So actually, the slower you are on this race, the harder it gets later on in the race, because you just got thousands of people before you going over the trails.
Well, so I know you've ran races, ultras, anything in fair weather. Running in this much rain, was there a unique impact on your body that I mean, obviously there's going to be something, but what was it? What was different?
Yeah, well, I can talk through the race a bit. I actually spent like an hour before this, like going through the race, because my memory sucks. So I think I was going through it and just looking at the profile and just trying to figure out what happened when. But so it starts in the city. You quickly enter into the suburbs, and eventually you get into like a forest. And the first aid station is about 12K, 7 miles in. And at that point you're already wet, but it's fine underfoot really. And then it's section 2. You really sort of from 12K in, you've got like a 10K, 6.5 mile section, which really starts into the trails. And that's where you start understanding, okay, actually it's going to be really wet underfoot here. It's not too much elevation. It's not too undulated, but you're getting to understand. And then it's section 3 was when you really started to understand, the degree of the challenge that was kind of ahead of us for the day. So with Mozart 100, you have like 3 or 4 major climbs in the first kind of 3/4 of the race. So the first climb was absolutely brutal. So you're going through this forestry. There's no switchbacks, so it's just a bit of a staircase, to be honest. And you've got a lot of exposure to what was very wet, sort of cold, horizontal wind. So you're going up, like I said, there's loads of you all together, just sort of trailing up this staircase. And it's about, at this point, it's like 7:30 a.m. And it's just like bitterly cold. And my hands were fully by the top. You get to the top, which is like, I think it was like 30K in. Your hands are numb, completely numb. Like I couldn't close down my poles. Like I had no way of like operating my hands. The side of my face was cold. So it was actually really tough weather. Like you talk about it being wet, that's fine, or it's like slippy underfoot, that's fine, but it's actually really cold as well. And so once you start heading down,
I just thought it was only wet. So wet and cold. My goodness, that's next level.
Yeah, so it's like 10 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I can do my best on distance.
I think it's 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not very good at this.
Yeah. So it's pretty cold. I think, it's 45. I don't know, something like that. But it feels colder because of the wind as well. So you're wet and then you got the wind, so it feels a lot colder. But yeah, on the way down from that first peak, it's really slippery. And that was when we started realizing that this is going to be really tough. You've got people falling over, leaning back, falling backwards. One guy broke his pole in front of me, didn't hurt himself, but was mostly concerned about his pole. And then you're just like, oh man. So at that point, I actually put my poles away. I'm like, no poles on the downhill because I just don't want to risk that at all.
Impaling yourself, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were sections where it's particularly slippy. So you really do need like 2 extra feet in the sense that you need those poles in front of you. But I think for the most part, I like to use my kind of arms for the balance and just get rid of the poles. But yeah, it was like once you get to sort of section 3, section 4, you really start realizing how tough it is. Yeah.
And then, I mean, what was the blister situation?
Yeah, people have asked this. I feel like I'm kind of lucky with that or something. I was trying to figure out why I didn't really have issues with that. I use ultras.
That's what I was going to say. I think your ultras are real helpful on that level, would be my guess.
Yeah, because I've got a bit of space in the toe box. I changed my socks twice, so I had 3 pairs of socks. But to be honest with you, like you only get about 20 minutes of relatively dry sock usage after you change them. So like the reality is you're not really having dry socks. So yeah, I sort of just embraced. I wasn't avoiding any puddles or anything. I just kind of embraced it. because what mattered to me more was just taking a route that made sense rather than just, you're going to get wet. So I think I was lucky. But I don't tend to have my shoes too tight. I think that actually, if you have them too tight, then you'll probably rub a little bit more aggressively,
that's interesting,
or something like that.
Yeah.
This is all guesswork, though. I'm not.
Yeah.
I think I'm quite lucky with blisters, to be fair.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a problem for me.
I think anecdotal, like sometimes people are hard on anecdotal. It's like anecdotal is the only thing that we know is actually truly happening. Like you're telling me what truly happened for you. So to say that was your experience is sometimes better than just getting an average of, how things are going. So looser shoes and wider toe box helpful in the rain. I mean, I would say from my experience, when I was running more in ultras with all that extra room for my feet to swell and to move around, like that was helpful for me too.
Yeah, I think that was probably it, for sure. But yeah, a lot of people, I got a few messages about that, but maybe I would advise people use like talcum powder in their socks and stuff like that as well. But
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So was it on your Instagram feed that I saw, I mean, like the river, it looked like there was like a river, like on some of the downhill, it just looked like people were having to go on either side of it because there was so much rushing water.
Yeah. The trails are really good. Like they drain well they flow well, but they do kind of turn into like rivers. There were times where there were actually times where I was kind of laughing to myself because it was just so ridiculous what we were doing.
Yeah.
It was just hundreds of crazy people running down what was supposed to be a trail, but in reality it was like a river. I filmed what I could, but there were times where I wouldn't even dare get my phone out because it was really quite treacherous underfoot. Yeah. And what you saw was just a bit of water, but sometimes it's just fully, I don't know, like 5 inches of just wet water. You're going through rivers. Towards the end as well, there was a section that was probably usually just a stream, but was a fully blown river.
Yeah.
And I think there was actually some high risk. I think so. Before the race director sent a note out saying that they'd adjusted the route slightly, taken a kilometer away from the overall distance, 200 meters of elevation gain away. So we didn't really know why, but it could have been for that reason. And then at the end of the race, I heard that people who are out there for more than kind of 17, 18 hours were actually stopped at the 96K mark. And they stopped the race entirely.
Really?
For safety reasons.
Okay.
So I don't really know what that was for. I think I don't know. Maybe they had a few cases of people, with hypothermia, or I don't know. But it definitely got more dangerous, and the trails became just so wet. We got to, if you get to like section 5, and you've got like it's a downhill, and it's about like 500 meters, 1,700 feet of downhill, and that was like really muddy. We were all in kind of good spirits at that point, though. I think you're like a marathon in. I remember going down this section and thinking, okay, shit, this is really dodgy, like slippy. But it was all kind of grass. It wasn't rocky, so if you fell over, it was fine. And then this girl, I don't know if she was doing the 100 or the 50 miler, but she just came like slipping down next to me.
Really?
And just absolutely stacked it, but like slid down. And I knew she didn't hurt herself, so I just sort of laughed. And then she turned around to me and like laughed back. I don't think she spoke English, so we didn't have any banter, but she just laughed. And then she went off again. And then about 10 meters later, completely stacked it again. She was just going for it. I think there's two attitudes. You can either be cautious or you can just slip down the slide.
Well, you hit on my next question, actually, because I'm curious, when you're in these sort of sufferfests, the conversations on the trail with the other runners can be quite memorable, or, the bond that's happening out there is pretty awesome. Did you have any, what was talk like on the trail when other people, when you spoke the same language? You know what I mean? Like, was it just like hey, this is hard, isn't it? Haha. Like, what was it like?
Yeah. I did have a couple of moments where I tried to strike up conversation, but they didn't speak English, which is more my fault than theirs.
Sure.
I went past one girl and I just said, are you ready for the hill? And then she just said, I'm sorry, I am French, and I was like, okay. And then she didn't know what I said, but I just sort of turned to her and said, well, good luck, because there's a big hill coming. I don't know if you know. But I shared like 10 miles or 15 miles with one guy from like the Midlands here in the UK.
Okay.
Who he was doing the 80k, the 50 miler, which starts like 25k into the 100k. So it's the same route, just not the first section.
Got it.
So we were sort of coming in a bit, and then he kind of slowed down a bit towards the end, and I tried to finish up. That was nice because it's always nice, isn't it, when you have a bit of chat. You're able to kind of pass the time. I did have a chat as well, kind of earlier on, with someone who he asked me a really weird question. Actually, he said, "What brings you to Salzburg?" I was like, "This, dude." what do you think? But I obviously knew he was asking like why this race. But
I see. Oh, okay. It's like, what are you expecting? Yeah.
I'm here. I didn't just like find out about a race yesterday. I actually said to him, the main reason I'm here is for the views, and we shared a laugh because there were no views.
Yeah. Oh man.
But yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things. European races, I think, especially if you're English, most of us don't speak French or German or whatever, so you have that language barrier. But there's this shared experience, which is like an international language, I guess.
Absolutely. I was going to say it sort of transcends language, although it would be nice to be able to converse, but there is this just like, this bond, this shared suffering thing that, you don't need language to share that moment with somebody.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. And I think like, it's kind of nice, the races in Europe anyway, they get people from all over. So you've got Brits, you've got Polish, you've got Germans and French and Spanish. There are some races where they have, they had it on the bibs. They have your flag at UTMB, your sort of nationality flag, which is nice. There are some races that have a dedicated kind of bib that you can put on the back if you choose to. They didn't have that at this race, but it would have been quite nice. So not an issue, but one of the things I found was I'm doing the 100, and so I'm kind of trying to understand, okay, what pace are other people going at? Am I going too fast, too slow? Sort of sizing people up in a way to try and help myself. But I didn't know if people were doing the 80k, so I didn't know for sure. So I'd be sort of running past people and just trying to check their bib to see which race they were doing and stuff. So
what they were doing.
Yeah, you get sort of 30, 40k in, and you're sort of mixed with the Mozart Ultra people as well. So maybe it would have been nice to have a bit more clarity about who you're sort of running with. But
I mean, I want to say kudos to the race directors. I mean, UTMB has had their fair share of getting dumped on, but man, I think in a situation like this, to pull off the race, to still give the runners the experience. I know that their hands are probably tied. Like, hey, these runners have paid for this. They're here. Practically, we can't do the refunds. We got to find a way to make this happen. There's a business case for why they moved forward. However, I'm comfortable with that. And if I were a runner, I'd be thankful for that. Like, I'm here, like you're saying, like, I'm here for it. I bought the plane ticket. I've been training for this. Like, get me to that starting line still. So that they went for it, pulled it off. Last second course corrections, making decisions to stop runners at 97K when their dream was 108K. Like, all of those things are really hard, real-time decisions that they're making, and to pull it off. And for the only thing that we're laughing about on the other side is how miserable it was. Not that people got hurt, not that people, I mean, surely there's someone somewhere that had to be rushed to the hospital at a race that size, but that's an impressive operation. So kudos to them.
They did it. They did a great job. I think it started like 12 years ago, and I think it was 2012 it started, by Josef Meyerhofer. He's from Salzburg. He's an ultra runner. And then, it just grew and grew in popularity. And then back in 2020, UTMB bought it. I'm pretty certain it's the same dude who still runs it. He was there.
So he's still active.
Yeah, he was there collecting the drop bags at the start. Very involved. I think, there's some things that you kind of sacrifice at the start line. You don't have the same kind of vibe, I guess. Everyone was just sort of crowding in the marquee, waiting for the rain, waiting for the last possible moment to get to the start line.
Yeah.
but yeah, I think they did a great job, and you know, just amazingly organized. I think all the aid stations were great. They had soup, which was
Oh, that's
amazing.
critical. That's so
Yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah. That was actually a game changer. I think like I got like a marathon in, and they saw that I looked like really terrible,
Yeah.
and they offered me soup, and I was like, do you know what? Yeah, let's do that. And then it was like the second from last aid station as well. I think I had like final 10K to go, and it was bitterly cold, very exposed section. So you just got kind of farmland, but no kind of wood. So you've got this rain coming in, you're soaking wet. You've obviously been running for best part of 100K, and the wind's coming through. You're so cold, and you're shivering. And they look at you like, I don't know what to do or how to help you, but they can offer you soup. They were nice. Yeah, good event. Like, I have to say, I was thinking the entire way. You know, you've got these big climbs. There's the sort of fourth major climb, which is like the final climb, is an absolute killer. It goes up to the 60K mark, which is right on the top. You know, you're 1,300 meters above zero. What's that like? 1,300 meters is
Times three, like what do you for 3,900?
It's like it's for like 4,300 feet up or something. So you know, you go all the way up there, and then you got to go all the way back down again. It's a really tough section, and that downhill was, I mean, that was the hardest climb of the day, and then the downhill was also particularly difficult. But you're going back down to the aid station at 67K in, which is the same aid station as the 50K. It's like a major aid station where you have your drop bag. So at 50K, at like halfway, you have your drop bag. Then you head off to do this crazy climb. You come back down, and then you get to the bottom and you get your drop bag again. And I stayed there for like 20 minutes, just to sort of hang out with my girlfriend and just like recoup.
Yep.
Because
no shame in that.
needed a sock change, and I needed some pickles, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. So speaking of that, one of my questions I enjoy asking as I'm talking with European races, like I've done one on the Surmlands in Stockholm. Did one on the main event, the main UTMB event. Is aid station food. You know, American aid station food is, you know, I think our food system is largely poisoned to some degree. So we've got, you know, the cheapest, most affordable food is also the junkiest. That's probably true all over at this point. And we'll have soup, and some aid stations do something a little bit different. But I mean, usually it's like what we have here is cup ramen, whatever stuff, like, you know, just grocery store, bottom shelf stuff. No judgment. It's just, that's what American is like. And it's always fun to hear about what a European race is like. Was there anything like unique, like to the region at aid station tables? Was there cheese? Was there meat? Or at a race that size, are they probably having to keep it sort of bottom of the shelf junk food?
It depends what aid station you're at. The basic aid stations, the sort of bare minimum that they had was an array of fruit. So you had your orange, your sliced oranges, your watermelon, which is always kind of my go-to. They have, you know, a few sponsors. So you had like an energy drink sponsor. So you've obviously got the water, the Vasa.
Okay.
And then you've got the like energy drink, which you can use, of course. And then at some aid stations, they would have some additional. So I eat a plant-based diet, so I'm not really looking for like the others. But I did see that they had like salami and cheese kind of cracker stuff going on. They had like chocolate cake slices and stuff, which did look appealing, to be fair. But I was just mainly keeping to the fruit. And then I had my own like bars and like gummies, you know, like sort of wine gum type things.
What is your personal
and then Tailwind?
Okay, Tailwind. Okay, what's is Tailwind your personal go-to? Is that what you carry with you? And what gummies do you carry with you? Like, what's your preference?
Yeah, big on Tailwind. I think for me, it's like a staple. Even if I'm doing a short race, I just like to have water on my right, Tailwind on my left.
Okay.
I'll have the variety pack to keep things interesting, and I like to have the less risky. So I like to have the risky flavors at the start, and then the less risky flavors later on.
What's the less risky for me? Mandarin. I could my 100 miler
Yeah,
was Mandarin top to bottom. I don't
yeah,
get tired
fair.
of it. So good.
Yeah, I think it is the best one.
Yeah.
Mandarin lemon. There's an unflavored one which is safe. I think I have to say there's like a coffee flavor one which I'm big on coffee, but I think it, like for Tailwind that yeah it doesn't. I don't hate any of their flavors, to be fair. It's just you know
Yeah.
you never know what you're going to feel like 50 miles
Yeah.
in. So
Yeah. And I'll be clear
yeah
here. They don't pay me anything. I'm just legitimately like I don't get flavor fatigue. They're the number one
yeah
thing I recommend. Their sugar, like their everything is so, I mean, yeah, to me it's that flavor fatigue thing. That's so key. There's no I don't with every other one I get tired of it. With theirs for
mm,
whatever reason. And maybe it's because it's just not like a in your face flavor. Maybe it's subtle. I don't know what it is, but I could do it for 35 and a half hours.
yeah that's fair enough. It is my staple. To be fair, so I have a staple of Tailwind, and I'm like the other stuff is like solids. So that's where it gets more risky, to be fair. Like I
Yeah.
have these protein bars or whatever, but
Okay.
so we have, I don't know what brands you guys all have, but we have access to like Cliff or Trek bars or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I will always, or at least now I've learned to think about what I need in an hour's time or in an hour and a half. So
Mm-hmm.
even if I don't need it, like I'll get my watch to do a nutrition ping like
Oh,
every
cool.
hour.
Okay.
So an hour into the race, I'll get pinged for nutrition, and no matter how I feel, even if I feel good, whatever, don't think I need some food, I'll have a bar, like solid food,
Yeah.
because I know that in an hour's time, I probably will need some sort of food.
Yeah.
And then like sweets, so something sweet, so, you know, in the military they call it morale. Like I always think morale when I eat those sweets because it's just like a really sweet, amazing in
Hmm.
the moment feeling of just like you're
Huh.
forgetting everything. You're just like, I'm in the moment, just enjoying this
Wow.
gummy, whatever it is.
That's
So
amazing.
I have a bit of morale, which is like, I'll obviously have like vegan sweets, vegan gummies or
Okay.
whatever, which are fairly easy to get, but you can get like, you know, wine gums or whatever you like.
Okay.
And and then like sodium electrolyte tablets,
Okay.
which is obviously, it's not really nutrition, but it's something that I've learned the hard way you need to get ahead of.
Yeah.
The 100K I did before this one, I had mad cramp issues, and you can't really save yourself from that. Like you can start taking these tablets after you've got cramp, but you're kind of wrecked already. So I think like
Yeah.
if you can be disciplined enough to every couple of hours or whatever it is, just
Yes.
take a tablet.
Yep.
That's gonna help. Yeah.
Well, where does this race live? Okay, where I'm at in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing the race, I'm miserable, I hate it. I've been in that situation before, and then those races I look back on really fond, um, with fondness. Where does this one live in your mind? Like, I know it's only a few days out, but like as you categorize it, put it in the file cabinet of all the hard things that you've done in your life. Where does this
Yeah.
one live? How do you think about it? How do you characterize it? What is it? What did you learn about yourself?
Yeah, although I think obviously it's a shame that I didn't get the views, blah blah blah. I
Right.
actually really, really loved this race personally because for me, you know, it was really hard being injured and not being able to run, and there were times during that injured times where I didn't know if I would be able to run again. You know, you start thinking crazy things.
Yeah.
So a lot of work went into getting to the start line. So I was proud to get to the start line,
Yeah.
and then I think the one thing I was most proud of, to be honest with you, is I think I managed to keep a really positive attitude throughout it, like laughing about the
That's great.
ridiculousness of it. And
Not
yeah,
easy.
I think that's a skill. I think that is a skill that you have
Yeah.
to learn. Like I've definitely done an ultra before that destroyed me emotionally, and I was very
Yeah.
immature in my reaction to it. And I was like, do you know what? Like, why do I even do this? This is
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah.
Obviously came crawling back. But yeah, I think, but I think like I'm proud of how it went. Like I think I got I surprised myself with the time I got, especially given the
Yeah.
conditions. I was happy with my attitude. I actually really enjoyed the trails, despite the weather. The trails were cool. Um,
Yeah. Great.
And so it sits well. I would, even though the weather was dog shite, I would recommend this event to anyone who can get to it, because I just think it's a really great, like, there are some downhills that are really runnable, and like if you're interested in, like, if you're happy to sort of lean into a downhill and just like sort of get some speed going, like, it's really fun. You can really chomp up the miles at certain sections, which I find really satisfying. There's nothing like I don't love the endless climbing just because of the sheer sort of slow pace of it.
Same.
But then if you can kind of balance that out with a downhill that's actually quite runnable. Not all of it was like that, obviously, but some of it was very runnable downhill. So it's like it's satisfying, and it's a satisfying race, I think.
Would there be spectators at this race like I see at other, marquee European, and were there on this unique weather day, or would there normally be?
Well, before the race, I'd heard reports that so if you finish in the city, there is one final mount that you have to climb. It's like a massive staircase. I think it's probably famous in the city for its climb, and so they have to put it in there, don't they? But once you actually get over that and you go into the city, I've heard that on races where there's normal Austrian summer weather, it's like a full crowd. Everyone's cheering you on. Everyone's having beers outside the bars and just like outside in the restaurants and cheering you on. It's a full kind of event in that sense.
That's cool.
There wasn't much of that for obvious reasons. No one's really out in the rain. But there was some, like when you come around the corner, you've got spectators who know the people who are running, who are cheering you on. And there are people in the city, and they know what's going on, and they're cheering you, and they know you're coming to the finish line. So it is, it's a cool finish, but I think on better weather years, it's epic. So I've heard.
One of my favorite, kind of by way of landing the plane here a little bit, one of my favorite discussions from season 1 was talking with you about hitting a wall and looking for the door, and on the other side is Narnia, and combine that with talking about, you were talking about knowing when to be serious and knowing when to be lighthearted. So I'm curious in this, I want to know both of those things for you. How serious did you have to be in this, and how playful? Like, what was your ratio of seriousness? Like, take it seriously to have a great time, smile on your face. And second, did you find Narnia? Did you have to find Narnia, I guess?
So on the playfulness and seriousness and competitiveness with yourself, that sort of that balance, I tried. My priority was to be playful. My priority was to enjoy it, to have fun, to kind of not take it too seriously. I think for me, that's more important. I think I tend to lean more towards the serious side of things when you're sort of there in the event. So it's helpful for me to try and remind myself to be like smiling through it. So I think I did a good job of that. But there were for me, like, it's important when I'm doing some certain uphills that I find a rhythm, and I'm serious in the sense that I'm very focused on that rhythm when I'm driving uphill. So I might be hiking, but I'm really finding a rhythm with my poles and very focused, very serious about getting to the top. I find it easier to be lighthearted on the downhills because it is more fun. So I think I did a good job. I'm happy with how that went.
Nice.
I felt quite emotional at the end because it was a lot. But I was still laughing about my emotional state. So
nice.
That was cool. In terms of finding Narnia, I think for me that analogy is like you don't really know. You don't know your limits until you reach them and surpass them, right? And Narnia really is where you get past it and you go, oh wait,
wow,
there's more to me. There's actually,
more.
And there were times, there were times where I was like, obviously it's an ultra and there's no way to make an ultra easy, but there were times where I was like, this is really hard. Am I gonna make it? And then interestingly, about 20K, so like 13 miles from the end, my legs just started opening up, and I just started running a lot better and just feeling like I didn't have 90K behind me. And I was like, wow. That is genuinely what I was talking about with Josh. I was like, that's what I was talking about. It's happening. Like I'm opening up. Like, this is mad. Like my and so I did. in some capacity, I did find Narnia in a way. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I hope since I'll be for a year living in Paris, that I guess that's just, I don't know. Is it the tube? Am I taking the tube if I'm going from Paris, or from the north of France into the UK? Is that the terminology?
The Eurostar. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I would love to come. It'd
The
be
tunnel.
so fun to go on a run with you and do one of your Instagram reels where you're saying such insightful, thoughtful things. I dig it. I love it so much. It'd be fun to go on a run. Or if you are down in Paris, we do it down there. But
yeah, man.
Your Narnia advice, that was critical for me. So I love to hear that. You got there too. I think that doesn't get talked about enough. I don't talk about that enough with other people. That's so good. So congrats on getting the finish.
Yeah, and congrats on Zion, man. I was watching. I was cheering you on from
talk about emotional
endings.
That was an emotional ending, man.
Yeah, man, for sure. Yeah, epic.
All right. Well, I hope we can hang out sometime in person.
Yeah, me too.
All right,
me too. Yeah. Speak soon. Cheers, man.
Yeah,
ciao.